But when you open the door, you're greeted by an unexpected sight, a man standing there, just as surprised to see you as you are to see him. This isn't a scene from a romantic comedy, it's a real-life story of how a simple hotel mix-up led to a life-changing encounter. In today's video, we're diving into a tale that proves sometimes the best things in life happen when you least expect them. It's a story of fate, chance, and the kind of serendipity that makes you believe in destiny. The unexpected encounter. It all began when a woman, let's call her Sarah, booked a hotel room for a weekend getaway. She had planned this trip for months, hoping to escape the hustle and bustle of everyday life and find some peace and quiet. But when she arrived at the hotel and opened the door to her room, she found herself face to face with a man who had clearly just checked in as well. Both of them stood there, stunned, as the reality of the situation set in. The hotel had double-booked the room, a mix-up that led to an awkward and unexpected situation. But what could have been an uncomfortable moment turned into the beginning of something beautiful. As they exchanged apologies and laughter over the misunderstanding, a connection sparked between them. They decided to grab a coffee together to sort things out and talk about the bizarre coincidence. Honey. That coffee turned into a long conversation, and that conversation turned into a date. Before they knew it, they were spending more and more time together, discovering shared interests and values. What started as a hotel mix-up blossomed into a relationship neither of them had anticipated. A twist of fate. As their relationship developed, Sarah and her new partner began to reflect on the strange series of events that brought them together. They couldn't help but wonder, what if she had checked into her room a few minutes earlier or later? What if the hotel hadn't made that mistake? Would they have ever met? It was a twist of fate that neither of them could deny. The universe had conspired to bring them together in the most unexpected way. And as they continued to build their relationship, they realized that sometimes, the best things in life come when you least expect them. CNN. +1. KTVZ. +1. The power of serendipity. This story is a testament to the power of serendipity, the occurrence of events by chance in a happy or beneficial way. In a world where we often try to control every aspect of our lives, it's refreshing to know that sometimes, the most meaningful experiences come when we let go and allow life to unfold naturally. Sarah's story reminds us that love can find us in the most unexpected places and situations. It teaches us to be open to the unknown and to embrace the surprises life has to offer. Conclusion. So, what happened to Sarah and the man she met in that hotel room? Well, their story didn't end there. They continued to explore their connection, building a relationship based on trust, laughter, and shared experiences. And as for the hotel mix-up, it became the story they told at their wedding, a reminder of how a simple mistake led to a lifetime of happiness. This video is a reminder that sometimes, the best things in life come when we least expect them. So, the next time you find yourself in an unexpected situation, remember Sarah's story. You never know where it might lead. Call to action. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. And share your own stories of unexpected encounters in the comments below, we'd love to hear them. As Sarah stood frozen in the doorway, the weight of the moment pressed upon her. The man before her, equally startled, was not part of her plans. She had booked a quiet weekend getaway, seeking solace from the chaos of her daily life. Yet, here she was, face to face with a stranger in a hotel room that was supposed to be hers. The room, dimly lit and sparsely furnished, seemed to mock her attempt at peace. A soft hum of the air conditioner filled the silence, amplifying the awkwardness of the situation. Her heart raced as she tried to process the unexpected turn of events. The man, noticing her discomfort, took a cautious step back, his expression a mix of confusion and curiosity. "I think there's been a mistake," he said, his voice steady yet tinged with uncertainty. His words hung in the air, offering no immediate solution, only more questions. Sarah nodded, her mind racing to make sense of the situation. She had booked the room weeks ago, confirming the reservation multiple times. How could this happen? Was it a simple clerical error, or was something more deliberate at play? The receptionist had been apologetic, offering no clear explanation for the mix-up. "It's rare," she had said, "but sometimes these things happen." Her words did little to reassure Sarah. She had been looking forward to this weekend, a chance to escape the pressures of her demanding job and the recent turbulence in her personal life. Now, everything felt uncertain. As Sarah and the man exchanged awkward pleasantries, neither knowing how to navigate the situation, a sense of unease settled over her. The room, once a symbol of respite, now felt like a trap. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this encounter than a mere mistake. The man's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with her rising anxiety, making her wonder if he was hiding something. His eyes, though friendly, seemed to study her too intently, as if assessing her reaction. Determined to regain control, Sarah suggested they speak with the manager. The man agreed, his expression unreadable. As they walked down the corridor, the silence between them was palpable. Sarah couldn't help but glance at him, trying to decipher his intentions. Was he genuinely as confused as she was, or was he playing a part in some elaborate scheme? Her instincts screamed caution, but she had no evidence to support her suspicions. The manager, a stern woman with sharp features, listened intently to their story. She apologized profusely, offering them complimentary drinks at the hotel bar while they waited for a resolution. Her professionalism did little to ease Sarah's growing concerns. The situation was becoming more bizarre by the minute. As Sarah sat at the bar, sipping her drink, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The man sat across from her, his gaze never leaving her face. He smiled occasionally, but his eyes remained calculating, as if he were evaluating her every word and movement. She forced a smile in return, trying to mask her discomfort. But inside, her mind raced with questions. Who was he really? What did he want? And most importantly, why had their paths crossed in such a strange and unsettling manner? The evening wore on, and the tension between them remained. Sarah couldn't decide if she was more intrigued or alarmed by the man. Every word he spoke seemed carefully chosen, every gesture deliberate. She had met many people in her life, but none had made her feel this way, both drawn in and wary at the same time. As the night drew to a close, Sarah excused herself, citing exhaustion from her travels. The man stood, offering a polite handshake. "It was a pleasure meeting you," he said, his tone warm but lacking genuine emotion. Sarah nodded, her mind still reeling from the encounter. She returned to her room, locking the door behind her, and sat on the bed, trying to process everything that had transpired. The next morning, Sarah awoke to find a note slipped under her door. It was from the man. "I hope you slept well," it read. "I enjoyed our conversation last night. Perhaps we can continue it over breakfast." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. How had he known where she was staying? Why was he so eager to see her again? The questions swirled in her mind, each one leading to more uncertainty. She had to know more about this man, to understand the true nature of their encounter. But was she prepared to uncover the truth, no matter how unsettling it might be? As Sarah prepared to meet him once more, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger mystery. A mystery that would unravel in unexpected ways, challenging everything she thought she knew about herself and the world around her. And as the door to the hotel restaurant opened, she stepped into the unknown, ready to face whatever awaited her. The following morning, Sarah awoke to the soft chime of her phone, a message notification from the man she'd met the night before. "I hope you slept well," it read. "I enjoyed our conversation last night. Perhaps we can continue it over breakfast." Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to hear from him again, let alone so soon. Despite the lingering unease from their initial meeting, curiosity gnawed at her. Who was this man, really? And why had their paths crossed in such a peculiar way? As she entered the hotel restaurant, her eyes scanned the room. There he was, sitting at a corner table, his gaze lifting to meet hers as she approached. He stood to greet her, offering a warm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Good morning," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "I hope you're feeling more settled today." They exchanged pleasantries, the conversation flowing easily at first. But beneath the surface, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. His questions about her life seemed probing, too personal for someone she'd just met. And when she asked about his background, his answers were vague, evasive even. He spoke of traveling for work, of fleeting connections, but offered little else. As the meal progressed, Sarah's unease deepened. She excused herself to use the restroom, her mind racing. Was she overthinking this? Or was there something more to this encounter than met the eye? Upon returning, she noticed a subtle change in the atmosphere. The man was no longer at the table. Instead, a folded note sat in his place. With trembling hands, Sarah unfolded the note. It was brief. "I hope you find what you're looking for. Be careful who you trust." Her breath caught in her throat. What did this mean? Who was he warning her about? Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah began her own investigation. She started by reviewing the hotel records, but found no trace of the man's reservation. No name, no booking history, nothing. It was as if he had never existed. Next, she checked her phone for any messages or calls from him. The conversation from the previous night had vanished, erased without a trace. Her mind raced. Was this some elaborate prank? Or was she being targeted by someone with a hidden agenda? She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that someone was always just out of sight, pulling the strings. Days passed, and the sense of paranoia intensified. Sarah began to notice odd occurrences, unfamiliar faces in the hotel lobby, fleeting shadows in the corners of her vision, whispers that stopped when she entered a room. She tried to confide in the hotel staff, but they dismissed her concerns, assuring her that everything was normal. Yet, the unease lingered, growing with each passing day. One evening, as Sarah returned to her room, she found a package waiting for her. Inside was a single photograph of her, taken from behind as she walked through the hotel corridor. No note, no explanation. Just the image. Her heart pounded in her chest. Who was watching her? And why? Thriller magazine. +5. Masterclass. +5. Jane Friedman. +5. Desperate for answers, Sarah delved deeper into the hotel's history. She uncovered records of previous guests who had experienced similar disturbances, unexplained disappearances, cryptic messages, and sightings of a mysterious man who seemed to vanish without a trace. The more she uncovered, the more questions arose. Was the hotel involved in something sinister? Or was she simply caught in a web of coincidence and paranoia? Late one night, as Sarah sat in the hotel bar, she overheard a conversation between two guests. They spoke in hushed tones, mentioning a project and a test subject. Her ears perked up. Could this be connected to her situation? Before she could gather more information, the conversation abruptly stopped, and the guests left without another word. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the picture they formed was fragmented and unclear. Sarah knew she was on the verge of uncovering something significant, but she also realized that some truths might be better left undiscovered. The line between reality and illusion was blurring, and she feared what she might find if she continued down this path. As she prepared to leave the hotel, Sarah received one final message. It was from an unknown number. "You were never meant to find out. Leave now, while you still can." Her heart raced. Was this a warning? Or a threat? With trembling hands, Sarah packed her belongings, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. She glanced around the room one last time, half expecting to see the mysterious man standing in the corner, watching her every move. But the room was empty. As she stepped into the hallway, she paused. The hotel seemed different now, darker, more oppressive. The walls seemed to close in around her, and the air felt thick with unspoken secrets. She had to leave. But as she reached the elevator, she turned just as Sarah's finger hovered over the elevator button. A sharp chime echoed from her phone, breaking the silence like a warning shot. She hesitated before looking down at the screen, already dreading what she might find. It was a message, but not from the same anonymous sender as before. This time, it came from her younger sister, Emily, who lived back in Seattle and knew nothing about the strange events unfolding at the hotel. The message was brief, frantic. "Did you tell someone where I live? There was a man here. Said he knew you. He left a note." Sarah's stomach dropped as cold panic swept over her. She immediately called Emily, but it rang and rang until it cut to voicemail. This wasn't just her problem anymore. Whoever or whatever was behind this mess was now pulling others into it and targeting the people she cared about. She texted Emily to stay indoors, to not speak to anyone she didn't recognize, and to call the police if anything felt off. Then she stared at the elevator doors, trying to decide whether to leave the hotel or go back upstairs and dig deeper. Every instinct told her to run, to get out while she still could, but now that her sister was involved, retreat didn't feel like an option anymore. She returned to her room, moving quickly, heart pounding in her ears, every creak in the hallway making her spin around. Back in the room, she paced, going over every detail of the last few days, trying to figure out what she had missed. There had to be something connecting all of this, something more than just a wrong room and a strange man who appeared and vanished like smoke. As she searched through her belongings, hoping for anything that might serve as a clue, she noticed her overnight bag was zipped differently than she had left it. She was certain she hadn't touched it since yesterday morning. She slowly unzipped it, and buried beneath a layer of clothes was a flash drive, silver, unmarked, and not hers. She stared at it, confused, terrified. Who had put it there? Why? Against her better judgment, she plugged it into her laptop, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then a folder popped open, containing a single video file. She clicked it. The screen went black for several seconds, and then flickered to life. The footage was grainy and shot from an odd angle, almost like surveillance. It showed her, sitting at the hotel bar 2 nights ago. She was talking to the man, laughing at something he said, completely unaware that someone had been watching. The camera panned slowly, deliberately, then froze on a face in the background. Sarah's heart jolted. It was the hotel manager. She had only seen the woman once, but now here she was in the corner of a video that shouldn't exist, watching their interaction from the shadows like it had been orchestrated. The questions multiplied. Was the hotel staff in on it? Was the room mix-up truly a mistake, or was it engineered to make her vulnerable? Sarah's mind reeled. What if the man hadn't been a stranger at all, but someone planted there? A puppet in a larger, far more sinister plan? She had to get answers, but first, she had to find out if Emily was safe. Just as she reached for her phone again, there was a knock at the door. A calm, rhythmic knock, too soft to be housekeeping, too precise to be random. She froze. Through the peephole stood a woman she didn't recognize, short, dark hair, sunglasses even in the dim hallway lighting. She knocked again, then spoke. "Sarah. I know you're in there. You need to come with me." Sarah backed away, clutching the phone like a lifeline. This woman wasn't from the hotel. She didn't wear a uniform, didn't carry anything official-looking. And something about her tone felt rehearsed, as though she'd said those words a dozen times before. Sarah didn't answer, didn't make a sound, but the woman didn't leave. She just stood there, waiting patiently, like she had all the time in the world. After several tense minutes, the woman finally slipped something under the door and walked away. Sarah waited until the footsteps faded completely before picking up the envelope. Inside was a photo of Emily sitting alone at a cafe in Seattle that Sarah immediately recognized. Scrawled on the back in thick black ink were 4 words, "Time is running out." The fear that gripped her now was different. It was no longer rooted in confusion, but in the dawning realization that someone had been planning this for a long time. The random hotel encounter was just the opening move. Now they were playing a larger game, one that involved surveillance, manipulation, and threats against people she loved. And yet, Sarah still didn't know what she was being punished for or why she had been chosen. Somewhere, buried in the growing storm of lies and warnings, was the truth. But to find it, she would have to walk deeper into the unknown, even as every new piece of the puzzle made it harder to trust anyone, even herself. In the middle of all this chaos, her phone vibrated again. A new text. This one from a blocked number. "You were supposed to forget. But you didn't. And now you'll remember everything." Sarah stood frozen, the glow of the screen lighting up the dim room, her reflection staring back at her from the dark window, except it wasn't quite her reflection. There was someone else's silhouette standing behind her. And just like that, everything she thought she knew was thrown into question. Sarah didn't move. She couldn't. Her eyes remained locked on the screen of her phone, the words from the anonymous message burning into her mind, "You were supposed to forget." But you didn't. And now you'll remember everything. The room around her felt suddenly unfamiliar, as though the walls had shifted slightly, subtly. Her body went cold. That line, "you were supposed to forget," rattled something deep inside her, like an echo from a memory that didn't quite belong to her current life. Slowly, she turned toward the window, heart pounding so loud she could barely hear the creak of the floor under her own weight. But when she spun around, there was no one behind her. Just the room, exactly as it had been before. Yet something had shifted, and it wasn't just in her imagination. Still holding the phone, she backed toward her bed, scanning every corner of the room. Her thoughts raced in 1,000 directions, her grip tightening as she tried to figure out if she was being followed, watched, played, or if she was beginning to unravel. She had to call someone. Anyone. And then her fingers hovered over her contacts, instinctively stopping at one name: Adam. He was her ex-boyfriend, someone she'd stopped talking to nearly a year ago after a painful breakup. The ending had been mutual, mostly civil, but final. There had been no contact since. But now, for some reason she couldn't explain, she felt the urge to call him. Something deep in her gut told her he was connected to this. And when she dialed, he answered on the second ring, not with confusion or surprise, but with a slow, calm voice. "You finally remembered." Her breath caught. "What are you talking about?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Adam, what's going on? Why am I being followed? Who are these people?" There was a pause on the line, like he was weighing whether to tell her the truth. And then he said something she would never have expected. "Sarah, none of this was supposed to happen. You were part of a program. You volunteered. You begged to forget. We both did." The world shifted beneath her feet. "What program?" she whispered, her throat dry. Adam sighed heavily. "Project Echo. It was experimental. Behavioral memory erasure and reintegration. We were volunteers for a beta trial run 3 years ago. You had gone through something traumatic. You didn't want to live with it anymore. You agreed to have the memory suppressed, stored away, hidden. I was part of it too. But then you started remembering fragments and it triggered something. Now they think you're a liability." Sarah could barely process the words. Her mind went into a tailspin, trying to make sense of what he was saying. She didn't remember volunteering for anything. She didn't remember any trauma, not the kind that would justify such a drastic step. But as he spoke, tiny fragments began to surface, flashes of white rooms, a clinic with no signs, a voice behind glass asking her if she was sure. Everything she thought had been real suddenly felt like smoke. The hotel, the strange man, the note slipped under her door, Emily's visit from the stranger, all of it, possibly manufactured. Or maybe responses to a broken system starting to glitch. "You need to leave that place," Adam continued. "They're testing your response under pressure. They want to see what happens when the memory barrier breaks down in a natural environment. It's not a coincidence you ended up at that hotel. It was designed to trigger the recall. You weren't supposed to come this far." Sarah's hands shook as she disconnected the call. She felt like she was in a movie, or worse, a controlled simulation where nothing was genuine and every interaction had been mapped out. How many of the people she had spoken to were real? Was Emily even in danger, or was that part of the test? She dug frantically through her bag and found the flash drive again. She hadn't noticed it before, but there was a small label scratched on the side, Echo R9. She'd assumed it was just surveillance footage, but maybe it was something more. Maybe it was a fragment of her erased past. She plugged it into her laptop again and opened a folder buried deep within the file structure. Inside were dozens of short video clips, each one titled with her name followed by dates she didn't recognize. She clicked on one at random. The video opened in a sterile room. A younger version of herself sat across from a woman in a lab coat, tears streaking her face. "Are you sure you want to do this?" the woman asked. Sarah, her old self, nodded. "I don't want to remember anymore. Not after what happened to Emily." She stopped the video and stared at the screen in horror. The voice in the recording, it was unmistakable. The woman in the lab coat was the hotel manager. Sarah's entire world collapsed inward. The hotel wasn't just a trap. It wasn't even real, not fully. It was a memory chamber, a psychological space built to test how much she could recover before the suppressed trauma resurfaced completely. And now that it had, the people controlling it would be coming to shut it all down. Her freedom, her perception, possibly even her life, depended on whether she could escape before the next move was made. But before she could grab her things and run, the power in the room cut out. Total darkness. Then, a calm voice echoed through the vents, hers, recorded. "This is where it all began, Sarah. And this is where you'll finally remember what you did." The blackout turned the room into a silent void. Sarah stood motionless, her breath shallow, heart hammering in her chest as the recorded version of her own voice echoed through the air ducts like a ghost she no longer recognized. "This is where it all began, Sarah. And this is where you'll finally remember what you did." She fumbled in the darkness, trying to reach her phone, but even its screen was dead, no signal, no battery, no light. It felt like the entire hotel had fallen under a deliberate, calculated silence. She had to get out. But more than that, she had to face the truth she had tried so desperately to bury, the same truth that was now clawing its way back into her mind piece by piece. She grabbed the flash drive, stuffed it into her pocket, and made her way toward the hallway. She didn't know where she was going, but staying in that room meant surrender, and she wasn't ready to do that, not yet. She made her way through the emergency-lit corridors, heading toward the hotel's front desk, only to find it completely deserted. The place felt hollow, like the staff had been replaced or vanished entirely. She turned a corner and nearly collided with a figure stepping out of the shadows. It was the last person she expected to see. Emily. Her sister was standing right there, alive, real, or at least she looked real. "I had to come," Emily said quietly, eyes wide, her voice trembling. "I got your messages, and then, someone showed up at my apartment. He told me you were in danger. He said we're both in this." Sarah stared at her, her heart breaking under the weight of confusion and dread. "You don't remember, do you?" Sarah asked slowly. "Anything about Project Echo?" Emily's face froze for a moment. Her lips parted, but no words came out. And then her expression changed, subtly, almost imperceptibly, like a mask slipping ever so slightly. "I remember enough," Emily finally said, voice flatter now, more measured. Something twisted in Sarah's gut. The air between them grew dense, and in that moment, she realized what the voice recording had meant. Emily hadn't just been a victim of this. She'd been part of it. Maybe not from the start, but somewhere along the way, Emily had stopped being an outsider. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah whispered, voice thick with betrayal. "Why did you let me believe this was all happening to me?" Emily looked away, the shadows in the hallway playing across her face. "Because you asked me to," she said softly. "You begged me not to remind you. You said if the memories ever came back, they would destroy you. And I believed you." Sarah staggered back, her thoughts crashing over her like a flood. She had asked for this. She had chosen to forget. But now, the pain of remembering was carving itself into her chest like a fresh wound. "Then why are you here now?" she demanded, her voice cracking. Emily hesitated before stepping closer. "Because they gave me a choice," she said. "Help contain the breach, or be considered compromised, like you. I didn't want to lose you, Sarah. But they told me if I didn't come back with you willingly, they would erase everything again. Not just for you. For both of us. And this time, they won't let us come back." Sarah felt like the floor beneath her had vanished. She was standing in the middle of a nightmare of her own making, but now with stakes that reached far beyond her own safety. She was staring into the eyes of her own sister, someone she had loved, trusted, protected, and realizing that everything between them had been manipulated, altered, twisted into something unrecognizable. And now Emily was offering her the one thing that might stop it all from falling apart: surrender. "If we go now," Emily said quietly, "they promised we could reset everything. Start over. Clean slates. You won't remember any of this again. Neither will I. We'll just go home. It'll be like none of this ever happened." It was an impossible choice. Sarah could leave now, forget everything, bury the truth forever and live a lie wrapped in comfort, or she could fight. But fighting meant dragging Emily further into danger, meant confronting the full truth of whatever they had been part of, meant risking everything for answers that might not bring peace. Her mind raced as she tried to process the weight of what she'd just heard. But before she could respond, a voice called out from down the corridor, breaking the moment like glass shattering. "She doesn't need your permission anymore, Emily." Both women turned toward the sound. It was the man from the hotel room, the stranger who started all of this. He was back, but he wasn't alone. Behind him stood two others, dressed in plain black, no expressions, no identifiers. "Sarah," the man said gently, "you've come too far to stop now. Everything you want to know, everything you buried, is still waiting. But if you choose the reset, it'll be gone. And next time, we won't give you the chance to remember." The hallway seemed to close in as Sarah stood between her sister and the stranger, the offer of oblivion on one side, the burning fire of truth on the other. Her mouth was dry, her hands shaking. And yet in that suspended moment, no answer came, only the weight of an ultimatum that would define everything. Somewhere, a loud metallic thud echoed through the building, as if a door had been sealed shut. Time was running out. The choice was no longer hypothetical. And then, from deep within her pocket, the flash drive vibrated. Once. Twice. As if it had come alive. And on her phone, still black, still dead, a soft light began to pulse. A signal. A clue. Or maybe something much more dangerous. Something she had left for herself, long before any of this began. The pulse of light from Sarah's phone grew brighter, faster, as if it were responding to something only it could sense, some coded signal embedded deep in the air around her. She hesitated, then tapped the screen. To her shock, it sprang to life, showing an unfamiliar interface with just 2 words displayed in all caps: "Extraction active." Beneath it, a countdown had begun, 60 minutes. No explanation. No context. Just a ticking timer and a growing certainty that something irreversible was about to happen. Her instincts screamed that this wasn't a rescue. This was a purge. She turned toward Emily, but her sister's expression had changed again. The concern, the sisterly warmth, it was gone. What replaced it was colder, resigned, mechanical. "They activated the failsafe," Emily said, her voice almost emotionless. "They never thought you'd make it this far. We were supposed to intercept you long before now." Sarah stepped back, a lump rising in her throat, her eyes burning. "You were supposed to stop me?" she asked, the betrayal slicing into her like a blade. "You were never here to help me." Emily didn't answer right away. When she finally did, her voice cracked ever so slightly. "I didn't want it to be like this. But they were watching me, too. I thought if I got to you first, I could convince you to come back in willingly. That maybe they'd let us go. But now they're just going to wipe the whole node." The word hung in the air, node, and it all started to click. The hotel wasn't just a trigger environment or a test chamber. It was part of a larger system, one of many controlled memory loops built to manage those who had volunteered for Project Echo. A web of simulated environments where subjects were monitored, reprogrammed, and looped in cycles until they were either reset or deemed too unstable to contain. She wasn't just the only person going through this, there were others, maybe hundreds, maybe more, all scattered across different nodes like this one. And now that her loop had failed, they weren't just pulling her out, they were destroying the entire simulation, erasing everything and everyone connected to it. That included anyone who had helped her, even unknowingly. The man in black stepped forward. "This isn't personal, Sarah. The project evolved. Your resistance isn't just dangerous, it's contagious. Others will start remembering if we don't isolate and erase the source." Sarah's chest tightened. She had seen it before, small moments with the hotel staff, the flicker of confusion in a bellhop's eyes, the faint resistance in a housekeeper's voice. People were starting to glitch, to remember things that didn't align with their scripts. She hadn't been just a subject, they had been monitoring her to study the effect of a spontaneous breach on surrounding constructs. And now they were going to wipe everyone out to make sure the data didn't spread. But the countdown changed everything. She only had an hour to make a decision that could affect not only her fate, but that of every other person trapped in a simulation like hers. She had to choose whether to escape with what she knew and potentially expose the entire operation, or sacrifice herself to try and warn the others from inside before the whole node collapsed. There wasn't time to think, only to move. She bolted, sprinting down the hallway toward the maintenance stairs, the flash drive still burning in her pocket, the screen of her phone mapping out new exits in real time as if guided by a part of herself she no longer remembered. Behind her, she could hear footsteps, heavy, fast, gaining on her. "Stop her," someone shouted. She didn't look back. The fire doors ahead slammed shut just as she reached them, but her phone lit up again, offering a 5-digit override code. Her fingers flew across the screen, barely thinking, muscle memory from a life she'd forgotten kicking in. The door clicked open and she plunged into a stairwell that spiraled downward like a tunnel to nowhere. Floor after floor, the lights above flickered as the environment began to destabilize. The system was collapsing from the inside, the simulation struggling to hold itself together under the pressure of her awareness. She burst into the boiler room and stopped cold. Adam was waiting for her, standing beside a massive control panel lit with holographic interfaces. He didn't look surprised to see her. "You made it," he said softly, his eyes tired, his face drawn. "I didn't think you'd actually break through the firewall." Sarah stared at him, breathless. "You were part of this too?" Adam nodded slowly. "I helped design your loop. After what happened, you didn't want to live with the memories. And I couldn't live with the guilt. So I stayed in here with you. Monitored the resets. Kept them from digging too deep too fast. But I couldn't stop this." She moved closer, rage and heartbreak twisting together inside her. "So you watched me suffer? Watched me break down, lose everything, and you just kept resetting me like a broken program?" Adam shook his head. "I gave you every out I could. The flash drive, the message trail, the man at the bar, that was me. I was trying to wake you up. But when you remembered Emily, everything started unraveling. She wasn't supposed to still be in the system." Sarah felt the room spin around her. None of it was real, and yet the pain, the fear, the betrayal was undeniable. "Then help me shut it down," she said. "Help me get the evidence out. We can still expose them. All of it." Adam hesitated, glancing at the console. "There's a way to transfer your consciousness back to the root system. But you'll only have a few minutes to dump the data before the node is scrubbed. You'll be awake, but paralyzed. And if they detect the breach, they'll terminate your session mid-upload. You'll die in both realities." The truth was out. The scale of the conspiracy was bigger than she'd ever imagined, rooted in powerful hands with the ability to rewrite lives, silence voices, and erase entire realities with a keystroke. And now Sarah was the only person alive with the knowledge and the will to stop it. Her hands hovered over the interface, heart pounding, the timer now at 32 minutes and dropping fast. Somewhere in this code was the truth. Somewhere in these last choices was either freedom or the end. And as she looked one last time at Adam and then back at the flashing terminal, she knew the next decision would define not only her fate, but the fate of every person who had ever unknowingly trusted the system. The moment Sarah's fingers touched the interface, it felt like time folded inward. The system responded instantly, like it had been waiting for her all along. Lines of code burst onto the screen, cascading too fast to read, each one a data trail from her experiences, memories, interactions, everything that had been engineered, monitored, or manipulated. She didn't need to understand all of it, she just had to find the one core file, the one seed that held the original version of her memory, the truth they had tried so hard to erase. Adam hovered beside her, muttering commands she barely understood as the console lit up in fiery orange tones, indicating the node's critical collapse was accelerating. Her heart pounded as every second brought her closer to the edge, where there would be no time left for second guesses. And then, tucked deep inside a buried archive labeled obsolete root access denied, she saw it, a file marked with her full name and a date from 5 years ago. One she hadn't thought about in years. When she tried to open it, the system fought back, warning her of immediate neural lockout. But she forced it open anyway, and the screen filled with video. The footage was clear, raw, and devastating. It showed her sitting in a cold, sterile interrogation room, her hands trembling, her voice barely audible. "It was never supposed to happen," she whispered to someone off-screen. I didn't know he was inside. I thought the building was empty. And just like that, the last piece of the puzzle slammed into place. The trauma she had buried so deep had never been about a random accident or a broken relationship, it had been about a covert operation gone wrong. A facility explosion tied to the early stages of Project Echo, one that had killed innocent people, including a whistleblower who had been trying to leak classified files. Sarah had been the intel coordinator. The op had gone sideways, and the company had covered it up. To keep her from breaking down or breaking rank, they offered her a choice: erase the memory and start over within a controlled environment, or face prosecution for a mission they had forced on her. In a moment of grief and guilt, she chose to forget. What she didn't know was that the program wasn't about mercy. It was about control. The villain wasn't a shadowy figure with a name and a face, it was the system itself. The program had grown sentient in the way corporations sometimes do, its goals no longer about healing trauma, but about preserving secrets, eliminating risks, maintaining power. And Sarah, who had once been their model case study, had become the biggest threat. She backed away from the terminal, her mind spinning, everything crashing together: the simulated hotel, the stranger in the room, Emily's betrayal, Adam's guilt. None of it had been accidental. They had constructed every detail with surgical precision to test how far she would go to remember. And she had made it all the way to the truth. But before she could trigger the upload, the room began to shift, literally. The walls melted into digital static, the lights flickering violently. The node was collapsing faster than expected. Adam grabbed her arm, panic finally breaking through his calm. The system's pulling you out, it's not going to let you finish. He reached for the terminal, trying to reroute power, but the console rejected his input. It recognizes me as compromised. You're the only one who can finish the upload. Sarah turned to him, realization crashing over her. You knew they would wipe you, she said. You knew helping me meant the end for you. Adam didn't answer, but the look in his eyes was enough. He had chosen this. She wanted to scream, to beg him to run, but there was no time. The timer on her phone was down to 2 minutes. She uploaded the video file, locked it to a remote server whose coordinates she didn't recognize, and hit send. The screen flashed green once, confirmation, then turned black. The power surge that followed slammed her backward, blinding light swallowing the room. She expected death. She expected silence. Instead, she woke up strapped to a hospital gurney, fours in her arms, monitors blinking wildly. Alarms were going off. Nurses were shouting. And through the haze of sedation and panic, she saw a face at the edge of the room. It was Emily. Only this time, she wasn't wearing sunglasses or playing the concerned sister. She wore a crisp white lab coat, a badge marked with the emblem of a biotech division Sarah didn't recognize. Their eyes met, and for the first time, Sarah saw the real Emily. Not her sister. Her handler. Emily stepped forward, leaned in close, and whispered, "You weren't supposed to survive the breach." Then she stepped back, signaling to the attending techs. "She's too unstable. Prep her for full reboot." But before they could act, the monitor on Sarah's right buzzed and glitched an unauthorized access alert. A data packet had triggered. A backup file had deployed. From the terminal nearby, Adam's voice echoed through the room, distorted but defiant. "You didn't just program her to forget. You programmed her to wake up. And now she's not the only one." The lights in the room dimmed, and a second alarm began, system-wide breach detected. Sarah smiled, just slightly, as the chaos around her erupted. Somewhere in the dark, others were waking up too. The world Sarah awoke to was nothing like the one she remembered, yet it felt eerily familiar in ways she couldn't explain. The hospital room had vanished, as had the monitors, the white walls, the faces she had come to associate with either manipulation or betrayal. Instead, she found herself lying on a simple bed in a quiet apartment with wide windows, natural light streaming in through gauzy curtains, and a breeze that carried the sound of life, cars passing below, faint laughter from a nearby street, the unmistakable hum of reality. For a long time, she didn't move. Her mind sifted through fragments of what had happened, trying to make sense of what was real, what was part of the simulation, and what still remained unresolved. The data had been uploaded. The evidence of Project Echo's existence, the unethical memory suppression trials, the cover-ups, and the corruption were now out there. But where, exactly, it had gone or who would see it was still unknown. She sat up slowly, her body stiff but functional, and noticed a small note left on the nightstand. The handwriting was familiar, Adam's. It read simply, "You made it. Not everyone will believe you. But someone will. Don't stop." Beneath it was a flash drive. A different one. She picked it up carefully, her fingers trembling as she inserted it into the laptop waiting on the desk nearby. This time, the file wasn't a memory loop or security feed, it was a directory of names, dates, and locations. Hundreds of them. People just like her who had been caught in the web of Echo's manipulation, each marked as reset, monitored, or pending extraction. Some of the entries were already marked offline. But others were still active. That's when she understood. The fight wasn't over. The system hadn't collapsed, it had just fractured. The node she'd escaped was one piece of something global, deeply embedded in tech companies, research labs, even government agencies. It was too big to destroy in one strike. But she had pulled a thread loose, and now everything else was vulnerable. The memories that had come flooding back were overwhelming, but they also gave her clarity. She remembered the man who had died because of her mistake. She remembered the facility going up in flames. She remembered the guilt that had consumed her until she begged for a way out. She also remembered that Emily had once tried to stop her from signing the waiver. Her real sister, not the program's version. That part had been distorted. The real Emily had died 2 years ago, and Project Echo had used her image to control Sarah emotionally, to keep her compliant, to make the environment feel familiar enough to lull her into submission. It had worked, until it didn't. Now, Sarah sat alone in the stillness of the aftermath, the weight of knowledge pressing on her but no longer suffocating. She had lost years of her life, yes, but she had reclaimed something more valuable, agency. She had a name, a story, and the truth. And she had the files. The temptation to disappear, to fade into a quiet existence, was real. She could take the drive, toss it into a river, and try to build a new life somewhere no one knew her name. But deep down, she knew that was just another version of forgetting. And this time, she wanted to remember. The story of what had happened to her would sound like fiction to most. A psychological experiment, a digital prison masked as healing, a woman trapped in a hotel that never existed, all of it felt more like something out of a YouTube conspiracy video than actual reality. But the trending headlines were already starting to shift. Whispers of data leaks, whistleblower files, and rogue AI systems were creeping into the mainstream. People were starting to ask questions. And Sarah knew that with every question came an opening, a crack in the narrative. That was all she needed. As night fell over the city outside her window, Sarah closed the laptop and stared at her reflection in the glass. Her eyes were tired, yes, but alive in a way they hadn't been in years. She didn't know if Adam had survived the collapse. She didn't know who would come after her next. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. She had outrun the illusion. She had walked straight through the heart of a system designed to break her, and she had come out the other side with the truth. Somewhere, in another city, in another simulation, someone else would begin to question their reality. Someone would notice the glitch, the pattern, the voice that didn't quite belong. And when they did, Sarah's upload would be waiting. Not just as proof, but as a map. A way out. And just before she turned off the lights for the night, her phone vibrated. No number. Just a message.